Welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and share what you need to know about the future of mobile satellite connectivity. I'm your host, Lisa Dreer, and I'm excited to introduce our guest for today, Dave Bettinger. He is the CEO of SpaceLink. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you, Lisa. An absolute pleasure to be here again.
Great. Well, maybe you can start by giving us just a little bit of background on yourself and SpaceLink.
Absolutely. I have all of my career has been satellite communications and mobility applications, probably for more than half of that. Both as on the ground segment provider, started my career at Hughes Network Systems, creating the personal Earth station connectivity solutions. Moving then to help found iDirect, leading them into mobility applications, becoming the leader in maritime as well as aeronautical connectivity solutions, and then got the bug in 2014 to head on to the NGSO market, the non-geosynchronous satellite orbit market, and was one of the founding members of OneWeb. Rode that through its ups and downs, and it was a fantastic learning experience. And I think we're going to see a lot of neat stuff coming out of the NGSO market. But then I got an opportunity to become the CEO at SpaceLink, which was a company that was just being created and near the end of 2020. So I joined on as the CEO and have been loving it ever since. We are opening up a new market, taking connectivity solutions and the definition of mobility in new directions, which not only includes users on the ground and on the earth, but also users in space, whether they're humans or satellite spacecraft. We are looking to be able to provide the basically the internet in the sky, high speed connectivity to any users in any orbit and any altitude.
Wow, amazing. What an amazing career and how exciting what you're working on right now. Maybe we can start by having you talk a little bit about what you see as some of the most significant changes that we're going to see in that mobile connectivity over the next 3 to 5 years.
I think what's interesting is about satellite is there's a lot of new things and there's a lot of things that are new that have been done before. The thing that reaches out to me is probably the emergence of the NGSO players, O3b, Mpower. We'll see where that goes, and then the LEO players, of course, OneWeb, Starlink, Kuiper, and Telesat. They will add a whole new avenue and capability to what is going to be possible for mobility users of satellite solutions. And it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. They're already starting to enter some of those markets. In our particular market, again, assets in space, what we're seeing is just an increase in the amount of data that needs to go to and from assets in space, whether that's driven by all of the new missions, Earth observation, remote sensing, all of the missions that are in space, because that's the logical place to gather the data, all the way to other markets like human spaceflight. That's becoming a very much a commercial play. In addition to the governments that have been leading it for years, they need connectivity both for safety and for crew welfare. And then there's another key part of the market, which is in orbit servicing. These are, if you will, space robotics. These are applications in which either a tug is taking a satellite to a new location, a deorbiting solution that wants to take debris out of orbit, or going to actually service a failed or older satellite to provide more life. All of these near proximity maneuvers need communication to be able to make sure that they're doing it in a safe manner. So we're seeing a lot of interesting things. Flat panel antennas, that's another area that I think is emerging. It's again been talked about for years. In my 32 years, it's always been the holy grail. I think we have now seen a turning point where we're starting to see some players actually move to commoditization and getting the pricing down on those types of terminals, leading obviously to applications with NGSO where the satellites move, or mobility solutions where the users move.
Right. Oh my gosh. So, right. I think this is one of the most exciting times in the satellite industry. There's just so much happening. When you talk about all of these communications that need to happen in space, what are some of those key new technologies that are going to enable that, I guess, in new or better ways?
Well, I think there's a lot of different drivers that could come under categories of technologies and business drivers. First of all, why space? What can be done in space that you cannot do in the ground? The number one is perspective. An Earth observation can't take pictures of the Earth unless it is off the Earth. Um, the second thing is the microgravity. There are applications that I think we're going to see a movement, an increased movement to manufacturing in space, whether it's pharmaceuticals or other applications that can take advantage of the microgravity. I think we're seeing an emergence of applications there, and then of course the complete vacuum that is in space also opens up some possibilities. So there's reasons why applications need to be in space. The things that are now starting to make it happen are, first and foremost, a reduction in cost of getting mass into orbit has come down significantly over the past 10 years, especially, and I think that's going to continue to drive. I just saw some very exciting uh, uh, industry analyst data that showed that ultimately they hope to get it down to $30 per kilogram to get into LEO, which is just unheard of. Right now, it's about $5,000 is kind of the standard place. So I think that's going to be able to enable business cases to be driven. Then you have Moore's law. Moore's law is making sensors smaller, less mass, less power, compute power. The ability to do things in space becomes more possible as Moore's law increases the density of the applications and the electronics that are being used in space. Again, that goes back to the mass and the power. Getting that into space is expensive, so a business case depends on those coming down over time. Um, and then thirdly, I think it's just quite simply the expectation of connectivity. Uh, we depend on the internet now for everything we do on the ground. Sometimes too much, I think, probably. Certainly, there are certainly a lot of potential people in the world that do not have those advantages, but really, it's becoming a broader um, uh, market on the ground side. In space, however, there's simply no choice. The only connectivity solutions they really have today is to wait until they happen to pass over a often busy, from an RF standpoint, busy teleport on the ground to be able to transfer their data up and down, get new tasking information, and download the data they've collected. So we're really excited about the use of optical technology in space to be able to drive the capabilities and provide an always-on connectivity solution that's expected on the ground. I think it'll help increase a utility like that will increase the applications in space as well.
Great. So how would that optical communication be different from the traditional RF?
So today, optical communications, basically sending high-speed data, gigabit speeds across light, has been obviously done for decades, especially on the ground. Our fiber optic networks that drive the internet are all optical communications. The use of it in space has been really just the realm previously of NASA and some of the other ESA, for instance, that have done experiments because it is a fantastic technology, but to this day has been very expensive and hard to deploy. What we're seeing now over the past literally 2 to 3 years has been a mass adoption of optical communications for space applications, mostly for intersatellite links. When you were operating in the free space without any air up there, it's the ideal place to utilize optical communications because you don't have any interference from the atmosphere to be able to interrupt it, and therefore you're able to do things that you simply cannot do in RF. First of all, optical brings terahertz, many terahertz of new spectrum, of new bandwidth to be used. Whereas we all know in the satellite world that spectrum is very is very limited for space applications. It's always a battle with terrestrial wireless applications, and there's really a limited amount. And so I think the ability to have more bandwidth will continue to see the adoption. The cost of terminals have gone down significantly as the volume and the applications have gone up. So now it's a very readily available with many different vendors for inter-satellite links. For defense applications, the smaller beam width, picture a laser pen pointer type of beam width. It's very difficult to intercept that from an adversary standpoint or to jam it. And so it has some natural resiliency that RF communication simply isn't able to do. And then the terminals themselves, I mentioned the cost, but also the size, mass, and power has come down relative to RF. It's now orders of magnitude smaller to be able to utilize optical comms than traditional RF. It's simply physics. The wavelengths are smaller, therefore the apertures and the equipment supporting it can be smaller as well.
Yeah. Wow. So lots of benefits to using optical. When you think about standards in the satellite industry, there's been, I think, just a lot of talk about, oh, we need standards in the industry now. What's your perspective on that?
I have been on both sides of that particular battle. As a starting out my career on the equipment, the ground equipment side, um, that argument is difficult in that you're an equipment provider, you're innovating, you're investing in your R&D. You want to be able to monetize the advantages you're bringing the network operator as well as the end user. You want to have a better waveform. You want to have better equipment. You want to be able to differentiate yourself in different ways. Now moving for the last 10 years on the operator side, I can see certainly the other side of the coin, and in that you do not want to be tied into a single equipment provider. Standards have the promise of bringing interoperability, multiple vendors, ultimately lower CPE costs as the scale increases and certainly the costs come down. The real problem with satellite, the satellite world and satellite mobility as well, is the market simply hasn't had the scale that the terrestrial wireless market. You're talking billions of users versus millions of users in the satellite side, or hundreds of thousands of users quite often. That type of scale has limited the business cases, I think, for a transition to a truly open standardization market. That being said, there's been a lot of success. DVB-S2, pretty much used by every satellite operator out there today, brings lower cost chipsets and advantages there. We're seeing a movement towards being able to utilize 5G NR waveforms, the next gen radio waveforms that come with 5G. Those are also leading to some other interesting applications and technology advantages like virtualization. An operator is a satellite operator especially is frankly sick of filling up their teleport with different vendors' hub equipment just because they may have users of those particular equipment on their network. On the other hand, if you're able to take some of the equipment out and do that processing in the cloud, which the promise of virtualization brings, you'd be able to leverage, perhaps the argument is that you could leverage lower cost of infrastructure, increase the capability of interoperability with software-defined waveforms. You can also take advantage of having other applications that are naturally cloud-based, where your customers are taking their data. In addition to that, you would also be able to take advantage of some of the virtualization capabilities that the 5G terrestrial wireless network has really driven. So I think there's a number of areas. Standardization for us as a satellite operator has been very important. We wanted to utilize optical communications. There was no standards out there when we started this program. The SDA and their partnership with DARPA have really driven not only the volumes for the constellations that they're building, but they've driven the standardization that will allow um, all the different vendors to agree upon at least a minimum set of capabilities that will allow for interoperability and start to foster an ever-growing ecosystem of optical intersatellite link technology providers. And that's important to us. We want to be able to have our end user customers have choices. We want to be able to drive down the costs and take advantage of the technology advantages that the market brings.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, just those are some great perspectives. When you think about actually delivering commercial satellite solutions today, what do you see as the challenges that still exist?
First and foremost, usually it comes down to one thing. It's the business case. The benefit of mobility markets, especially global mobility and maritime and aeronautical, is it's truly a global market, which brings scale and also because of lack of connectivity over oceans and most of the land areas, satellite was really the only choice. So that's the advantage of doing that. On the business case side, however, you have a high cost of capital to deploy your network. You've got to launch satellites. You've got to launch ground segment. It's costly. Given the fact that it's in space and it's different than having it on the ground, and you have to launch it there. That simply adds the cost to the. So it's high capital needs, I guess I want to say. And
Hmm.
then typically it's a longer path to revenue and a longer path to profitability. So you have to have patient investors. You have to have patient money that's behind you that's saying, I understand you're building infrastructure. It takes longer to be able to do that, especially since in space. But at the end of the day, you've got something that you're building that can last tens of years and ultimately through technology refresh, uh, be a profitable business in the longer range. So I think those are some of the challenges really come down to um, uh, really the making a profitable business out of it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. If you have investors that haven't worked in the space industry in the past, they may not be, I guess, familiar with those timelines that often go with space investments.
We hear that all the time. Why why does it take so long? And we're doing it faster than I think most other satellite operators have been able to move. So we're quite excited about our speed, but it is still relative to some of the deployments that you see on the ground. It's a different atmosphere, if you will.
Sure, no kidding. So if you're a user out there and you're wanting to get smarter on some of these technologies like optical communications in space, where and how should they go about learning about these technologies and how they might apply them to their business cases?
That's an interesting question. You use the word user. So what a user wants to focus on is their end user experience, which comes down to, are they getting the availability where and when they want it? Is it there? Are they getting the data rates and the capabilities that they're depending on? The applications that they're trying to run on top of these solutions, uh, are they being met by the underlying network? And then ultimately, the total cost of ownership, right? That has to be something that makes sense for their particular business cases. If you focus on those items really from an end user standpoint, they may not really have to go and educate themselves about the underlying technologies. Um, how often do you go and open up your cell phone and figure out how that works? I'm being a little tongue in cheek here, but the interesting thing is the satellite has always been a much more technical sales process. The end users are quite smart in most of the traditional satellite networks, especially on the terrestrial side. They have to educate themselves to really learn more. And so that education can come from a number of different ways. They certainly can start to look at what the satellite operators, their partners that they're trying to get the service from, what capabilities, what are the underlying technologies they are using, go off and research some of that. Um, for our users, it comes down to, we're trying to sell connectivity to somebody else's satellite, for instance, an Earth observation synthetic aperture radar satellite. And what And what they want to know is, oh, okay, so you're going to do that with optical communications. Is that done? Is that TRL 9? Is it cost effective? What do I have to do to my satellite to get that on there? So we end up having a very high touch model with our customer base. We have a large engineering team that is focused on our customers to be able to uh, certainly educate them, but really work hand in hand in being able to get an optical satellite, intersatellite link terminal selected, the right one that makes sense for them, meets their needs, and ultimately help them integrate it onto their satellite platform. A lot of times, working hand in hand, not only with us and our customer, but also the satellite manufacturer, because a lot of our customers are not the manufacturers of satellites themselves.
Mhm.
So it is very much a high touch model, and we find ourselves in educational mode quite often, trying to bring them up to speed. The benefit is as new technologies like optical become more and more utilized around different applications, as the constellations grow, as the SDA deploys their Tranche 0 and Tranche 1. DARPA has recently had great success in being able to demonstrate their optical links with their Mandrake 2 technology pathfinders, if you will. All of those things are going to lead to us having to educate our customers less and less in the future, because simply the word will be out there and it'll be widely accepted that optical is clearly the way to go.
Great. Well, Dave, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your insights. Just a great conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been a pleasure serving on the board of the MSUA and getting to know the other board members a lot better. And I really appreciate the what you were doing for the organization and for our industry as a whole. So it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you. I do want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association. You can learn more about the MSUA at msua.org. And we'll see you next time on MSUA's Game Changers Live.